Hey there YouTube, the Dapper Dinosaur here. So, as you can see, this one's not animated. I'm having to do a video rather quickly because I don't have much time to make this video in because I have to catch a flight later on and I had to build a new computer. Well, I had to have a new computer built for me. But I'm going to be responding to 5 questions for evolutionists from Carl Baugh's channel, Creation Evidence Museum. So, in case you don't know, Carl Baugh is who I like to call the man who would fail the Turing test, because he has yet to figure out how the humans communicate with each other. Take it away, Carl.
5 questions for evolutionists that I'd like to ask. And he said so far, no evolutionist has been able to answer these at all. Any one of them, let alone all 5 of them. And I thought that was just too good not to pass on. The first question David Retzel proposes is, where did all this come from?
Well, in an immediate sense, it came from the Big Bang.
All of this, where did it come from? In order to explain how the universe could arrive from a Big Bang, from an infinitely small speck of energy to what we have, you have to totally ignore all of the laws of physics, basically the laws of thermodynamics.
Okay, a couple things. One, Carl, try to remember that you just said that the Big Bang didn't start off with nothing. It started off with an infinitesimal speck of energy. Second, which law of thermodynamics has to be broken by the Big Bang? I mean, I know you're a creationist, so the answer is obviously the second law of thermodynamics, since that's the only law of thermodynamics creationists are even vaguely aware of, even if they always get it wrong. But no. The universe could simply start with an extremely low entropy, which then, because the universe as a whole is an isolated system, continues to rise throughout time. There's no even imaginable violation of the laws of thermodynamics in the Big Bang.
You have to totally re-explain in non-entity factors that just do not exist. It is fairyland.
I don't have to explain anything in non-factor entities that don't exist? What? Carl, that's not even a real sentence. What are you talking about?
There is no science behind the Big Bang. Where did all this come from? You only have 3 possibilities. Number 1, matter has always existed. Well, that is not fashionable in physics or astrophysics nor science today, because we know that there was a beginning. In fact, it has been established that there was a beginning to the expansion factor, so matter has not always existed.
Carl, do you remember when you said that you knew that the Big Bang was supposed to be the expansion of an infinitesimal dot of energy? Well, a dot of energy isn't matter, so the Big Bang doesn't posit that matter has always existed. Rather, it posits that because of E equals mc squared, some of the energy that originally existed at the beginning of the Big Bang later coalesced into matter. So there's no real problem of matter having to have existed for all of eternity. Matter came into existence at a certain point after the beginning of the universe.
The second alternative is, well, this matter just came out of nothing. But that's against all the laws of physics, all the principles primarily of thermodynamics, that it would just pop out of nothing. Now, I know there have been some...
Nope. As previously mentioned, matter coalesced out of the energy of the Big Bang.
Squirrely ideas about quantum fluctuations, and squirrely they are, because they meet none of the criteria of good science, good math, and good physics. There are some quantum fluctuation ideas that nothing could somehow wrinkle and produce something. That is absolutely absurd, and those who postulate this recognize it, yet they have to have some basic idea to ignore the third concept.
Carl, I think you're talking about ideas like the quantum fluctuations proposed to have been the initial cause of the Big Bang that people like Lawrence Krauss talk about. But that was not a philosophical nothing. Lawrence Krauss proposes that the fundamental quantum fields were already in existence at time equals 0. So that's something, But it's not the kind of thing we normally think of. It's not space or time or matter. But it's not an absolute philosophical absence of all existence of anything. And these ideas aren't squirrely, they're pretty consistent with our modern understanding of physics, but they're as yet unconfirmed.
The third alternative is that all of this was uniquely designed and came into existence by sound and energy.
Sound is something that has to occur in a medium. It's literally a vibration of the matter in a medium. So you're telling me that sound energy created the universe before there was a universe in which a medium to carry sound could exist, Carl. You think that that is a more reasonable explanation than the Big Bang?
Now, currently, physicists and astrophysicists have recognized that the base of all subatomic particles is sound and vibration.
Carl, sound isn't synonymous with any wave. I mean, you know that, right? Like, light comes in waves. It has a wavelength. But light isn't sound. You don't use your ears to hear it. It's not a vibration of the matter in a medium. And since subatomic particles, when they vibrate, can't vibrate in a larger medium made of matter because they are the smallest parts of matter themselves, then no, they are not composed of sound. Do you ever listen to yourself speak? Or ever read any physics to see if anything that you say even remotely makes sense? What am I talking about? No, of course you don't. That would mean that you would actually have to do science. And instead, you would prefer to simply pretend that rocks are actually fossils of human fingers for some reason.
The creation model is totally scientific. In fact, theorems that involved Occam's razor. And those theorems have to do with the straight line being the shortest distance at a vantage point. And his theorems also mandate that any concept that has the least amount of assumptions is the plausible concept to accept.
Occam's razor isn't a theorem. It has nothing to do with lines being the shortest distance from a certain vantage point. I don't even know what that means. Occam's razor says that the hypothesis with the fewest assumptions that is compatible with the data is to be preferred until it is disconfirmed by subsequent data. It's not even a theorem. It's just a rule of thumb.
Well, the concept of evolution postulates another of the questions, how did all of this come from rocks?
That's easy. It didn't.
Once it came into existence, there is no way that life could have originated from inorganic compounds. That involves one assumption, that is that organic compounds could arrive from inorganic, non-living chemistry.
Organic compounds don't arise from inorganic compounds. They form as organic compounds, because organic compounds are just all of the compounds containing carbon, except for a few, like carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide, that are excluded, well, basically by tradition. Hydrocarbons form spontaneously, and they're organic compounds. And in the presence of other elements and an energy source, they can form even more complicated organic compounds spontaneously. This isn't some kind of a mystery. We can make it happen in the lab. We found it happening out in space. It presumably even happens here on Earth, or at least it could have. Plus, there's no boundary between living and non-living chemistry. The smallest unit of life is the cell. But a cell is just a packet of chemicals, none of which themselves are alive. But together, they form a living unit by keeping the cell in a thermodynamic disequilibrium with the surrounding environment and using various energy sources and the energy gradient contained in them to keep themselves at this thermodynamic disequilibrium. Death is basically just when the cell can't do that anymore, and it starts to go towards thermodynamic equilibrium, at which point it can't recover.
Could progress to living functioning cells, could progress to living functioning organs and living functioning entities, but all the entities have to be in place simultaneously for the organism to function at all.
I'll freely admit that most of abiogenesis is pretty much a mystery. There are some good hypotheses. None of them are really good enough to count as a theory, And they're not all mutually contradictory, so if we ever do have a theory of abiogenesis, it might combine several of these hypotheses. But also, this idea that all organ systems need to be in place all at once for any organism to survive simply isn't true. If you look at animals around the world today, you will find that many of them lack organ systems that for a human, say, would be vital. Some organisms entirely lack a nervous system, like sponges, who also really lack any sort of organs at all. But you can also get to animals that don't have circulatory systems or respiratory systems. There are even some organisms that don't even really have a digestive system. Some parasitic worms are so simple that they actually can simply absorb nutrients from the intestines of their hosts directly into their cells without needing a digestive system. Tapeworms are more or less just some skin, some hooks, a rudimentary circulatory system, and a bunch of gonads. That's it. They have almost no organ systems. Look at a flatworm. Flatworms have very few organ systems. It turns out that relatively simple, small creatures don't need a fully formed set of organs that, say, a human or a dinosaur would need. And so, as organisms through time become larger and more complex, they can start to evolve more and more organ systems that all interconnect.
So all of these assumptions, they range from 6 to 13 to 15 assumptions. They're listed primarily as 7 assumptions, placing all living systems in kinship, but not a single one of them has ever been observed, cannot be reproduced in the laboratory after billions of dollars of experimental procedures.
A single one of what, Carl? These assumptions? What are you talking about? What 7 or 12 or whatever assumptions are there? You're just speaking a word salad, Carl. We can't observe some unnamed assumption in a laboratory if you're not even going to tell us what you're talking about.
Well, but creation begins with one simple assumption, that the universe and the living systems in it are so complicated they require a designer.
Well, no, they don't. The origin of the universe and the planet and biodiversity are all well explained by existing science in physics and biology. I'll grant you that the origin of life itself is not currently well explained in science, but that's something that we're working on, and we probably shouldn't jump to the conclusion that, it was magic, so we probably shouldn't look into it.
David Wetzel goes on to ask other questions. First of all, where did it all come from? Secondly, how could a Big Bang create a fine-tuned universe that we see? Scientists recognize that it's fine-tuned to 1 part in 100 billion, 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 billion. Absolutely impossible by accident.
Actually, there's no way to know if the laws of physics and the parameters of the universe are actually fine-tuned, because we don't currently know if those things are actually something that could have been otherwise, or if they themselves actually derive from some deeper physics. This is an open question in physics, but we can't simply jump to the conclusion that, this seems unlikely, therefore it didn't happen naturally. That's not how it works. We don't know how unlikely it is because we don't know what factors could affect these values. There might not even be any factors that could affect these values. Even if there are, we don't know to what degree the values could range. And there's still the possibility that there are other universes out there in which those parameters do vary, and if there are other universes, then it's actually not that unlikely that at least one exists in which we are capable of existing.
Thirdly, he asked, how could life come from rocks, from inorganic compounds?
It didn't, and no one thinks it did. It came from organic compounds, which themselves weren't rocks, although some of them may have been contained in rocks.
Fourthly, he asked, how could biological systems assemble by accident? They could not, and no evolutionary explanation is adequate.
Evolution isn't just a chance process. It contains chance elements, but also contains non-chance elements, like selection. So, organisms didn't evolve just by chance. The fifth question is basically just, well, we know there's a God, so how come you don't believe it? I'm not going to get into that because I don't do that on this channel. I don't discuss religion per se on this channel. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, please please hit the like button and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. And if you didn't, please hit the dislike button and subscribe anyway and leave me hateful comments. I actually enjoy that. Well, thanks for watching. I'm the Dapper Dinosaur.